Welcome everybody to Hope for Our Times, and I am in Jerusalem. We've had an amazing time here in Israel. And my guest today, you've seen him here before if you've been watching Hope for Our Times for a while. Dr. Hillel Newman is joining us. He is a diplomat with the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs and former Consul General, of Los Angeles, which is where we first met several years ago. You have experience as both an ambassador and an academic lecturer in Judaic studies, deeply committed to advancing Israel's interests, strengthening Jewish communities worldwide, and fostering educational and cultural understanding. And Hillel, it's wonderful to be able to do this with you again.
It's my pleasure. It's always a pleasure to be with you, Pastor Hughes, and what a beautiful place in the holy city of Jerusalem.
It is. It's right in the middle of the old city to find a place like this.
Beautiful.
And to be able to set up shop, I guess you would say. We make this into a studio.
It's a beautiful setting which gives you inspiration, really.
Last time I saw you was at your house, your home for Sukkot. Well, you invited us over there, and that was absolutely wonderful last year. And it's great to see you again.
You're invited anytime.
And by the way, everybody, just so you know, Hillel and I, we met several years ago, as I mentioned, in Los Angeles, and he was able to reach out to us, understanding that there are some Christians that think different than other Christians, and there's some of us who actually support Israel, and we understand what the Bible says regarding the covenant, God's covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that is an everlasting covenant, that God did not replace Israel. And so obviously, that's what we support here at Hope for Our Times. And we've had a great relationship ever since then, even when you left Los Angeles, came back here to the Holy Land.
Your support of Israel and your correct interpretation of the Bible is so appreciated by the State of Israel, by me personally. The relations between the Jewish communities and the Christian communities are so dear to my heart. It's something I'm prepared really to invest every effort in. And Jews make mistakes, Christians make mistakes, but we, I think, are on the same page. And for that, I commend the courage for taking the right approach, principled approach, an approach of orientation of values. Because there's some people that's so comfortable for them to go with the mob, to go with the herds, against Israel. So I appreciate and commend your courage.
Well, that is what's happening now. We have this herd mentality. It's culturally, to be culturally anti-Semitic, it's affecting everything. And so I look at this as an opportunity to do what's right. When you look at the Christian community, are you concerned with a growing anti-Semitic movement within Christianity? Do you see it coming from, I know we see it on the political right, but do you also witness it coming from within Christianity?
Yes, we see it all over. Unfortunately, it comes from the right, it comes from the left, the radical fringes on all sides. Of course, there's a lot from the Muslim community. I think a leading factor today is the immigration from Muslim Middle Eastern countries, where Islam has been politicized. There used to be even golden eras between the Jews and Muslims. When Jews were persecuted by the Inquisition, the Catholic Church, they found refuge under Islam. But today, Islam is so politicized that it's really a leading factor in the anti-Semitism against Jews and Israel. Amongst the Christian communities, of course, there is the split between those that have the correct interpretation of the Bible, as I said before, and those who are a bit lost in their interpretation, in their understanding. I served in the United States for 4 years in Los Angeles, and I even served in Boston. One of the best things that came out of my mission in Los Angeles was that I met you. But I saw churches there that are lost, that have gone the wrong way and have a mistaken interpretation of the relations between the Jews and the Christians.
Yeah, and it's, when I look at it, I know a lot of pastors, and a lot of them just disregard the Old Testament. They say, we only teach from the New Testament. And I remind them, do you realize that in the New Testament, that's also Jewish? It was Jewish writers throughout the Old and New Testament, except for just one author, and that was Luke. The rest of it, and he was very pro-Jew, Luke was. So you look at this and you go, don't you realize what this book teaches. And the other thing that I get accused a lot of is, because I support Israel, I think everything Israel ever does is perfect and right, that they've never done anything wrong, which to me is absurd, because the entire Bible is full of, it's really full of sins of Israel, God calling out Israel, whether it be the northern kingdom or the southern kingdom, and drawing him back. It's a story of redemption, of a people that need redeeming because they're sinners. And this is a strange thing, because this is foundational to Christianity, that we are all sinners. And suddenly the application to the Jews, I'm finding from too many people, they seem to separate Israel and go, well, no, we're God's done with them. Well, I find it troubling, but I feel like this is part of what God has called me to do, to educate Christianity. Even if pastors won't listen to me, some of the people who go to their churches will listen to me.
Yeah. Well, it's so important that you voice your voice. Of course, we come from the common heritage, the Judeo-Christian heritage. Let's not forget that Jesus was a Jew, and that's where it all comes from. Criticism of Israel, of course, is accepted. Israel is full of criticism. If you just walk the streets of Jerusalem, you'll hear every opinion and strong criticism against the government of Israel, against the policies of Israel. That's fine. The problem is that some have gone beyond the red line, as one would say, when they try to demonize the state of Israel, when they spread untruths about Israel, when they try to deny the factual history, the facts of history. They try to negate the state of Israel. So there are some that go beyond what I would call the red line. The criticism is fine. But when people have to go into the denial of history and the alteration of history and try to claim that there never was Jewish presence in Israel, that's part of the Palestinian line. So they follow hook, line and sinker the Palestinian line and say there's no Jewish temple, no Jewish presence. Of course, it's all lies, it's all disinformation. And so the first thing is to found yourself on the truth, justice and truth. And then we can move on. Criticism is fine.
So with that, let's go through some of the history of Israel. I have in this bag here, I wasn't planning on pulling it up, but I'm going to because I have it with me. You're going to appreciate this. This is this booklet. I'm sure you recognize this. So this is from the Supreme Muslim Council here in Jerusalem. Yes. I think it's dated 1927 or 1929.
1927.
With the Grand Mufti, who's the same one who educated Hitler on how to kill the Jews. He in there says, in fact, I want to show it to everybody, it's this book right here, booklet. The original is here, by the way. But he says this is a profound statement. It is, in his words, the one who sought to kill the Jews, teach Hitler, in the west wall of the chamber, a door opens into a staircase descending to Solomon's stables. This is a vast subterranean chamber of roughly rectangular shape, of which the chief feature is the imposing size of the piers. Of these, there are 15 rows of varying size and height supporting the vaults on which rests the roof. Little is known for certain of the early history of the chamber itself. It dates probably as far back as the construction of Solomon's temple. And then he goes on and he says, according to Josephus, it was in existence and was used as a place of refuge by the Jews at the time of the conquest of Jerusalem by Titus in 70 AD. He talks about the Knights Templar. But then he says in here, there is no doubt that this was the location of Solomon's temple. He says that. Right. But now, history is being rewritten. You go back to the British Mandate, you fast forward from there, you go to 1948 when Israel was attacked. The UN has never been favorable to Israel. And then we look at the territory of Judea and Samaria. Clearly it's Judea and Samaria, but even with the calling of it of West Bank is to rewrite the history.
Right. That's part of the problem, that you have to base peace and coexistence on truth. You cannot cave into lies and disinformation. And the Palestinian cause has gone in the wrong direction because, instead of building themselves on coexistence, on truth, they're trying to deny the Jewish presence, which goes against even what Islam scholars said, that this was a Jewish city and it was established. You just need to read the Bible to know the truth. So the Jewish presence should be undenied, and we should move forward in, okay, let's come to an understanding. But this attempt to alter history, rewrite history, is part of the problem. And that shows that true peace is not attainable with a partner who tries to deny your existence. It was Israel that recognized the Palestinians, although they never had a state, so they never had a political entity in the land of Israel. Never. Israel recognized them in order to come to some idea of coexistence. The problem is that they don't recognize us. They don't recognize the Jewish existence. This attack, the Hamas attack, we've tried so many times to come to an understanding with the Palestinians, relinquishing territory time and time again. The core issue of the conflict is that they don't accept the existence of the State of Israel or Jewish presence, sovereignty in the land of Israel. That's the core issue. It's not the problem of Israel recognition of the Palestinians, it's the opposite, the Palestinian recognition of Israel.
Yeah, but what we hear in Western media is exactly the opposite of that. Yes. When we look at the area of just Judea and Samaria, for example, and we find out it's actually occupied, when I look at history, it's actually Jordanian occupation from 1948 until 1967, and Israel could claim it as their own sovereignty, but now there's pushback from the U.S. government saying you're not going to be able to do that. Yeah. But how do the areas of Judea and Samaria actually work? Because when I see someone like Tucker Carlson, I see what he says, I know what the truth is, but what are some of the facts that underlie there? And weren't the Jews the first Palestinians, the first people ever called Palestinians?
Yes, the Jews were called Palestinians because Palestine was, named after the Philistines. It had nothing to do with Arabs. They were named after the Philistines, and when Rome wanted to wipe out Jewish existence or Jewish novelty in Israel, then they called it the Palestinia area, trying to wipe out Jewish identity. But they couldn't do that because there was always Jewish presence and Jewish existence in the land of Israel throughout all those centuries. And regarding Judea and Samaria, I must start off with the truth. And the truth is, you just need to read the Bible, archaeology. The truth is that Judea and Samaria were the historical homeland of the people of Israel.
Imagine being in Israel as the sun is rising over the Sea of Galilee, or walking on the streets of Jerusalem, visiting the city of Nazareth, or having a Bible study in Capernaum at the Apostle Peter's house. Pastor Tom Hughes will be leading a tour to the land of Jesus. We will explore Israel together and bring the Bible to life before your very eyes. We will visit Caesarea by the sea and Joppa, where Jonah caught a boat going in the wrong direction. We'll take a boat ride on the Sea of Galilee, just as Peter did when he walked on water. We will walk on the Mount of Olives and through the Garden of Gethsemane. You will have the opportunity to explore the Temple Mount and visit at the Western Wall and even go underneath the Temple Mount. You'll be able to visit the City of David and Hezekiah's tunnel. And have you ever wanted to float on the Dead Sea or visit the cave where David cut the corner of King Saul's robe? Or perhaps spending a morning at Masada? These are just some of the once-in-a-lifetime experiences you will have when you join us on our Israel trip.
You look at Kiryat Arba, which is part of Judea and Samaria, that's where the 4 patriarchs were buried. So those are the historical, biblical homeland of the Jewish people. So now you have attempts to try and wipe that out in order to come to peace. That's not the way you move towards coexistence. You have to move to coexistence, first of all, recognizing each other and recognizing the facts of history. Today, Israel went forward in trying to verge peace. Israel accepted the existence of the Palestinian Authority, what's called the Palestinian Authority, and gave them territories which were part of the historical homeland. We've never said that this was not our homeland. This was our homeland, but we were prepared to give them control in order to come to a coexistence. So Israel recognized the Palestinian Authority, relinquished territory of what we call Judea and Samaria, they call the West Bank, but it's the same territory. It's Judea and Samaria, which is the historical homeland of the Jews. We gave it over to the Palestinians for their self-control and self-rule. And the results, unfortunately, are not very good for us.
No,
because we just look at Gaza. We gave the entire Gaza Strip over, removed all Israeli settlements and existence, and all we got were rockets and attacks against Israel, and of course, October 7th attack. The same also with Judea and Samaria. We gave over Judea and Samaria to the Palestinians for their self-rule and control. And unfortunately, till today, it's a bed of incitement against Israel, incitement against Jews. They pay terrorists monthly fees to keep the families of terrorists. Who does such a thing in a normal... Right, pay to slay. They continue the incitement against Israel, and truly not recognize the existence of the State of Israel.
So the Oslo Accords offered Yasser Arafat, was it 96% of the area of Judea and Samaria? So here it is, they're saying, well, we want to have this, we want to coexist. It's simply not true. 96% of the area of Judea and Samaria, and Yasser Arafat said no.
Yes, there were several attempts, especially by Israel, to come to an agreement. And offers were put on the table. An offer was put on the table in the period of President Clinton. He even wrote about it in his book, that Israel accepted and the Palestinians did not. So you got a ridiculous, absurd situation that Israel is prepared to give up territory for peace with the Palestinians, and we have a Palestinian refusal. Because the Palestinians are 100% or nothing. They want to rub out the state of Israel. It's not a matter of setting up their own state. It's a matter of demolishing the Jewish state. That's the true issue of the Palestinians. Arafat played a game. He had a double talk. He spoke one thing in English and a different message in Arabic. And his messages in Arabic were clear. This is a part of a gradual scheme of taking over the state of Israel. So if you go and you interview Palestinians on the street, many of them will say it outwardly, that Tel Aviv and Jaffa are what they see as Palestine. They don't see a room for compromise. And certainly that's true for the Hamas, of course, which says it publicly and outwardly.
When we think of the subject of two different things, occupation and also genocide, we hear those two things all the time. The whole narrative for occupation has been flipped. Mm-hmm. To accuse Israel of occupying and colonizing also. Yeah. When I look at, from my perspective, and understanding the definition of colonizing, the Jews never colonized anywhere. And you look, you go, okay, well, wait a minute. If we go back again to the history of the Balfour Declaration, British Mandate, the UN, everything, and we realize Israel didn't colonize anything. You don't have a group of people who said, hey, let's go take that land. They have this land. This is the original, this is Israel's homeland. I was at the Temple Sifting Project and went through all of the evidence that's there. I understand the evidence that's there. Mm-hmm. But with that, what we do have with Islam is we have 56 countries that have been colonized by Islam, and now the attempt to colonize Europe and even parts of America. Those things are actually happening.
Yeah. We are the indigenous population of Israel, the land of Israel. You know, just recently, they found, not far from here, in excavations, they found a kohen, a writing in a kohen that had a correspondence between the kingdom of Assyria and the kingdom of Judah. And something they just found about 2 weeks ago. Israel was the indigenous population from antiquity till today. Israel was expelled from their land. There was always Jewish presence, but the majority were banished, were expelled from their land, and there was colonization. Colonization by the Assyrians, by the Babylonians, by the Romans, by the Islam. And now, at last, the people of Israel, you could see it as a miracle, returned to their homeland. There's no doubt that there's divine guidance in the fact that an unprecedented example of a nation after 3,000 years of exile returning to their homeland and returning to their ancient Hebrew language, renewing the country, and then all of a sudden the country is flourishing like never before. So this is the indigenous population coming back. They're not the colonists, they're the indigenous population. So those are the facts of anybody who wants to know the truth.
Well, there's no such thing as a Palestinian coin. There's no Palestinian history. And again, the very first people ever called Palestinian were the Jews at the time of Hadrian back in 135 AD, and continually. And so also, I think behind us, over that way, probably a few hundred yards, is the Temple Mount, and there's a big gold dome on there. Well, who is occupying? If you look at it from that perspective, because of the historical facts, and again, this booklet has the historical facts from the Supreme Muslim Council who hated Jews. He even admits it. So who's actually occupying when it comes to even the Temple Mount? I can't even go on the Temple Mount and hold a Bible.
So if it's your land, you can't occupy your own land, right? So this whole terminology of occupation, of course, is totally wrong when you refer to the Jews in their homeland of the land of Israel. So occupation is irrelevant in relation to the people of Israel returning to their homeland. You also mentioned genocide before. That's another of these lies, these disinformation spread out there. Occupation, starvation, So genocide. We've had a war with Hamas. We were brutally attacked. They killed 1,200 people in one day. It's the most brutal attack since the Holocaust on Jews. So Israel gradually took over and started defending itself. An act of self-defense started working. Even according to Hamas numbers, we're talking about 70,000 that we killed, and we know that at more than half, even if we accept the Hamas numbers, which are unreliable, we don't know exactly because they take the bodies and they disappear. There's no accountability there. But even if we accept the numbers, we know that more than half are militants, terrorists that were killed. So you're talking about a ratio of 2 to 1, something like that. It's the best ratio in urban warfare in the history of mankind. So you call that genocide? I mean, Israel could have bombed from the air and hundreds of thousands would have been killed. Israel didn't. Israel endangered its own soldiers in order to prevent the harm to any citizen or uninvolved citizen in the Palestinian side. So that's not genocide. When Israel facilitates aid and food, more than 2 million tons, that's not genocide. That's taking care of the people. So these lies, once and for all, must be refuted.
They do need to be. Has there ever been any nation that has fought against another nation that has taken humanitarian aid to the nation? They were attacked, then they go in and they actually give the attacker community food, medical assistance. Has that ever happened before, ever?
I haven't checked. I'm not an expert on world history of warfare, but I think it's unprecedented. It's certainly unprecedented in the scope and the amount and the quantity that Israel is allowed to facilitate for your enemy, really. They vote Hamas. So even if they're uninvolved citizens, which we don't know exactly the ratio of uninvolved and involved, we know that many of the hostages, for instance, the Israeli hostages, were held by citizens. The waves of entry into Israel on October the 7th on the attack. The first wave was Hamas. The second wave was jihad, all kinds of militant, radical organizations. The third wave were ordinary citizens that came walking with knives, with axes. They just came in order to rape, kill, butcher, take hostage as much as possible. So how do you measure who is uninvolved, who is involved, who is culprit, who's not? But still, Israel, only the assumption that there are many people who are not involved in the actual brutal attacks, has facilitated aid in unprecedented amounts.
And looking at this and hearing the ridiculous numbers, it was in, I think, May of 2022, the UN reported a 9-to-1 ratio of civilians dying per one combatant was pretty much the standard in warfare, and yet all of a sudden we come around, and even with the Hamas numbers, you realize it's nowhere near 90% that the UN said, and suddenly Israel is the evil one. Why do you think that is?
That's a deep question. There is good and there is evil in this world. And sadly, there's a lot of evil. You can look at it in theological terms of Satan and the good powers on earth and other terms. But there's a large part in this world today who are still bent on the destruction of the state of Israel and the killing of Jews. And therefore you can find a situation where even when Hamas attacks Israel, even before Israel acted militarily, there were so many voices applauding Hamas for their attack. You know, a few days after the attack, there were two prominent leaders from Europe that visited Israel, sympathy, solidarity visit. And they tweeted on their visit. And the responses, thousands of responses, anti-Israel responses. This was before even one soldier of Israel, one IDF soldier, was in Gaza or doing some kind of military action. So you can see that it's not fact-based. It's a hatred which is there. The question is, why is there this hatred? I would give it a few angles. So first of all, I would say, well, Jews are different. Perhaps there's something in the fact that people find it hard to suffer differences. Jews have come again after 3,000 years of exile, have shown that the ancient prophecy is true. And there's some people who try to deny prophecy, who try to deny even God, who try to deny divine guidance in this world. Maybe it's connected to that. There's pure anti-Semitism. We've seen it throughout the generations. It started off as religious persecution, went on to racial hatred, and I mean, in the Nazi period and the Holocaust, I mean, it was based on the race. Even if Jews changed their religion, it didn't help them. So there's this phenomena which continues through the generations. And you look at the United Nations and you see a body where automatically they have a majority against Israel and the West and the Jews. And they can decide tomorrow that Israel is responsible for flattening the earth, and they'll go through. So there's nothing to say about the UN that can be positive.
Yeah, no kidding. When we look at the areas of Judea and Samaria, let's take both of them, because in Judea you have Hebron, Samaria, Shechem or Shechem. So both of these are really foundational to Judaism. You already talked a little bit about King David. That was the beginning of his kingdom after being recognized by the tribe of Judah. I think it was 7.5 years there before moving everything to Jerusalem. That's the beginning. You have the tomb of the patriarchs there. You have Abraham. We have land purchases that were done there. Land purchases. So even then, there's title deeds. 5 different title deeds from what I found in the Bible when the people of Israel purchased the land. Yeah. So
Abraham purchased from Ephron the land for Kiryat Arba, which is the heart of Judea and Samaria.
Yeah. So you have that. You have Jacob purchasing the land in Shechem. Yes. We have David, obviously, the threshing floor. That's right up here. And then we have Omri and Jeremiah. Yeah. So we have these land purchases, and you're going, this is amazing. Who else does that? But I believe when I look at that, God was making a point, because God knows everything. So he knew the day would come when we'd have all these people that are accusing Israel of being occupiers, colonizers. We have that. We have that evidence of title deeds. When the Jews started coming back into the land, the early part of the Zionist movement, they were purchasing the land at exorbitant rates from the Arabs that lived here.
Yeah. You know, there's a commentator on the Bible, Rashi. The Jewish sages, in their material, the Talmudic material and the Mishnaic material, built a lot of sayings on the Bible. And Rashi, his tremendous brain, brought their different sayings to the interpretation of the Bible. The first Rashi on the Bible, starting off with Genesis, in the beginning, there was heaven and earth, God created heaven and earth. Rashi says, why do we need this story? So, I mean, the main idea of the Bible is commandments. So why is this story told? And he says, because the day will come when people will rise up and say, the land of Israel does not belong to the Jews. And this is a story to tell you from the beginning that God decides on the land, on the distribution of the land, and God already in the early antiquity decided that this land belongs to the Jews. This land of Israel belongs to the Jews. So it was predicted early as possible that enemies will rise and try to refute history and try to deny the right of the Jews.
I find it interesting, even in the New Testament, thinking of pastors, churches that I used to be affiliated with, that those things have changed. Even in the New Testament, you can validate the history of the Jews here, and this is still the epicenter. Mm-hmm. It didn't end when the New Testament came along. And I had a friend who had started getting influenced by some of the people in replacement theology, and I have a recent book out, Israel's Place in God's Eternal Plan, and he read it, and after he read it, he goes, I don't see how anybody can believe in replacement theology. And I said, it's easy. What people are told to do now, when you see the word Israel in your New Testament, just cross it out and put church. And it changes the narrative, hence they say Jesus was a Palestinian. Yeah. You know, we know, if you look at, you started this off by saying, if you look at the historical facts, even whether it be 20 years ago or 2,000 years ago, if you are willing to look at the facts, then you're going to understand God's place for the Jews, past, present, future. Yeah. But people are unwilling to look at the facts. It's like they don't want to be confused by the facts because it ruins their story. Right. And they have a story to tell.
Narrative and the mob theory is, of course, more important than the truth. I'd like to read that book, by the way, that you mentioned.
I will get you a copy. I think I have a couple of them here. In fact, I know I do. Okay. And so with this, with Judea and Samaria, Shechem and Hebron specifically, why do you think, I know what I think, but why do you think those two areas, along with Gaza, are such a major point of contention, and obviously Jerusalem? I believe Jerusalem itself is the epicenter of all spiritual dynamics taking place. But what's your thoughts on the areas of Hebron and Shechem?
Well, the conflict is really about the existence of a Jewish state or sovereignty in this region. That's the core issue. They attack the issue of Judea and Samaria and Gaza because they see it like the weak link, because Israel already was prepared to compromise, was prepared to relinquish the territory, which is, again, historic homeland, biblical homeland of the Jewish people. But Israel was prepared to relinquish this territory for peace. And therefore, there was also the idea of splitting the land, which Israel accepted and the Arabs did not. But we accepted the partition plan already even before the state was established. So Israel was prepared to move forward in the name of peace and coexistence and safety and security and stability. We were prepared to relinquish this territory. Therefore, it's regarded like the weak link. In the end, we took it over because we were attacked from these territories. And, in 1967, we took over again. We liberated what used to be the historical land of Israel because we were attacked from these lands. And then again, we were prepared to give it up for peace in Oslo Accords, but we just haven't received any peace. So if you ask why is Judea and Samaria and Gaza the bone of contention, it's just because it's like the weakest link, and they think that through that they can delegitimize the state of Israel. But the true battle is not about Judea and Samaria, it's about the entire state of Israel, the existence of the state of Israel.
Yeah, it is. I also find it interesting that you can't go into the area of Hebron, the tomb of the patriarchs, or down to the area of Jacob's well. You can't get into those areas. Well, why is it? I believe because it validates, you have the historical evidence, the archaeological evidence, everything is there that validates the existence of the Jews in its Jewish land. So they won't even let you look at the records. It's like, no, you can't open up these books. You can't look at these rocks because they disclose all of this truth.
Yes. Unfortunately, every piece of land that was given over to what we call the Palestinian Authority has become chaos and has become a place of refutation of history. And even the Christian community suffers. Bethlehem, you look at the Christian places, which were also Jewish places, right? You look at them, the Christian community is suffering. The only place in the Middle East where the Christian community is flourishing and growing is the state of Israel. And all these other places, including Bethlehem under the Palestinian Authority, the Christian community is suffering. And the same goes for the Jewish people. We are limited in our access to Jewish sites in the Palestinian Authority, like you mentioned. That's crazy, but that's the reality. In Israel itself, there's freedom of religion for all religions, 3 monotheistic religions. There's no holy site that is barred off from anybody. But here, Jews have a difficulty in going on the Temple Mount, which is the holy of holiest for the Jews. And as you mentioned, it's difficult to go with a Bible or pray. Israel accepted these limitations at the beginning for peace, but there is no peace. So there's no justification for these limitations anymore.
Somebody had commented to me a while back. They were very angry about my position on Israel, and they said, you can't even go, as soon as you land in Israel, they're going to confiscate your Bible. And I just challenged that. I said, that's one of the dumbest things I've heard. The only place in Israel I'm going to get my Bible confiscated is if I go on the Temple Mount or to some of the Islamic communities. But these lies are everywhere out there. Let me go back to 1917.
Just let me add one thing.
Yes.
The hypocrisy is so blatant. Because, they cry about freedom of religion, which is totally free in Israel. But no one says a word about the fact that there's no freedom of religion for Jews and Christians on the Temple Mount. The hypocrisy is amazing.
It is.
They cried about Palestinians being killed. But the moment Israel is no longer fighting in the Hamas areas in Gaza, dozens of Palestinians are being killed by Hamas. No one cares. No protests, not a word. The hypocrisy is amazing.
Where's Tucker Carlson over that? Where are all these protests at the universities in America over the people in Gaza that are being slaughtered by Hamas? Don't hear a word about it. Yeah, they're being executed.
Publicly on camera, no problem.
They're advertising
no protest,
everywhere. Nobody says a single word.
Yeah.
And then also, in 1917, we have the Balfour Declaration. Everything starts developing from there. From what I understand, the original intent was Israel was not just going to have the land from the Mediterranean to the Jordan River, but also what is now currently Jordan.
Yes.
That was going to be it. So British mandate comes along, they say, no, we're not going to give the Jews all of that land. But what they
cut off Jordan in 1922.
1922.
Right.
And
we thought, okay, so we do that for peace. But no.
So that was a two-state solution.
Then they started on the next piece. So this is the gradual idea of the Arab community, that piece by piece, the salami, what they call the salami project. Piece by piece, they cut off the state of Israel until it no longer exists.
Yeah. So it was 1922. You have Israel is given the land from everything west of the Jordan River.
Right.
But then what Britain did is they negated their responsibility, or they gave over their responsibility to rightly be the mandatory, and they gave it over to the League of Nations or the UN. So then the UN gives Israel a tiny bit of the land, not even everything west of the Jordan River. And then Israel's attacked 1948. So we have all of that history.
We accepted it, I must admit. We accepted the partition plan because we thought it would bring peace. Those who did not accept it are the Arab world.
And it did not.
Right.
Okay, I'm going to switch gears because we only have a few more minutes left.
Sure.
But here's some questions I have for you. This is going to totally change the dynamic for a few minutes. I think you're going to like this. Israel has survived incredible challenges throughout its history. From your perspective, what keeps the nation resilient today?
Oh, there are a few things. First of all, belief. There is a deep belief. The majority of the people of Israel today are secular. But it's a mistaken conception, because the vast majority are what we call traditionalists, which means that they don't keep the commandments of the Bible, the 613 commandments according to Judaism, but they're deep believers. And you've seen this in the war recently with the Hamas. You would have expected that perhaps some people would become heretic because of the attack of the Hamas and 1,200 Jews killed in one day and Jews slaughtered and butchered in cruelty. But no, there's been a strong movement of return to the roots, to the Bible. You see it in the songs. The most famous songs that were most popular during this period of 2 years were songs which spoke about the a preservation of the people of Israel and the return of the people to Zion and God preserving over the people of Israel. So there's a deep belief which brings a lot of optimism and resilience to the people of Israel. Another thing is unity in times of stress. The people of Israel are known for their division, for their differences of opinion. We're proud of the fact that every opinion can be voiced as long as it's not, violent or something like that. But any opinion, ideology is tolerated. So you have a lot of division, a lot of difference of opinion. But in times of need, the people of Israel come together. They unify, and they become a unified force of resilience. You can see it, just before the war, there were a lot of differences of opinion about the judicial reform and about political issues. Once the Hamas attacked, you can see people from the left and from the right sitting in the same tank, fighting the same battle, in the same battalion, working together for the common cause. So the people of Israel don't wail, or I would say they don't sink into victimhood. They move, look towards the future. Okay, what needs to be done now? And that's a power of resilience which I think is very powerful for the people of Israel. Some other nations sometimes just sink into victimhood and don't get out of that, like the Palestinians, for instance. They just look at their victimhood and they don't do anything for themselves, for their future. They don't take responsibility for their lives. The taking of responsibility is something which is very characteristic of the Jewish people, and that's, I think, the secret of their resilience as well.
I find it really fascinating looking at Israel, and while the war is going on, when people are still encouraging each other, they're still going out to dinner, they're still enjoying life, celebrating all of the feast days, celebrating Sukkot, all of these different things. It's like, no, we are still going to move forward and encouraging each other.
They understand the big picture.
Yeah, I've never seen, I don't think there's, well, I know there's not another nation in the world like it. I know that. For one thing, I read my Bible, but also you can actually observe these things. I even think some of these things bother the enemies of Israel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but they look at the big picture and they know that this is for a cause which is greater than them. Parents, we're a culture which celebrates life, not death. We're not the radical Islam seeks death, seeks devastation. Women, the mothers of martyrs, they're proud of the fact that their son killed himself in the name of the cause. Israel is a culture which celebrates life, looks forward towards life and optimism and building a future. But once we were under attack, parents were prepared to make the ultimate sacrifice. They wanted their sons and daughters to go into the IDF to defend the state of Israel. Because in the end, they see the greater picture. And we are not looking at individualism or the enjoyment of the individual. We're looking at the greater good, which is the existence and the preservation of the people of Israel.
The greater good. And with that, I think, Israel has always had this problem going all the way to their past. If you go back to the time of King David, the 12 tribes were not all interested in having David as their anointed king. 11 tribes didn't want anything to do with him. But if you go back to the time of Joseph, he has 11 brothers that sell him into slavery. And the 12 tribes of Jacob have always had a problem getting along. So as we look at things now, I know they're going to be unified. I do know that. That day is coming. But as we look at things now within the government, as Israel moves forward, I keep hearing rumblings of the challenges within the government. You still have these major differences. How do you see things going forward with that?
Well, look, diversity and differences of opinion, as I said, is part of our tradition and heritage, in fact, and we're actually proud of the fact that we're a democratic, volatile society that everyone can voice their opinion. So there will always be differences of opinion, but on the big issues, there's a wide consensus.
That's amazing.
And on the issues which are crucial for the existence of the State of Israel and the preservation of the Jewish people, wide consensus, like, for instance, the war against Hamas, Iran, and the issues which are like an existential threat to the people of Israel, there's hardly anyone who has a different opinion. There's no opposition and coalition in the issues of defending ourselves, fighting the war, defeating Iran. There's consensus. So Okay, there is division over whether a judicial reform should go forward or not, whether we should draft ultra-religious or not, and how many, but those are not the key issues. Let's remember that those are not the key issues.
Israel's surrounded by enemies, and with that, you're like, okay, we need to stay together. Okay, with this last thing, you had touched on it, and it sounds like you're saying at the same time there is a movement of people that are returning to biblical Judaism. Would that be accurate?
I would say to Judaism.
Judaism, okay. So there's
Judaism.
Rabbinical and biblical, two different things.
Yes, and there is a return, there's a deep belief in the people of Israel, which continues still today, and they can be secular by definition, but they're actually traditionalist. There's so many families, for instance, that, they come home on a Friday night, which is the Sabbath for the Jews, and they can make Kiddush, which is sanctifying the wine and the bread, and then go out and go to a soccer match, and there's that mix, but the deep belief is still there. So I think that's part of the resilience also of the people.
It's wonderful. Always wonderful to have you join me. Get to see you again here in the land of Israel, Eretz Israel. And by the way, you are going to Australia soon. So I want to ask our viewers to be praying for you.
Thank you.
Because I read about Australia, it might be a little bit difficult, but right now being Jewish anywhere is a little bit difficult. But we will be praying for you. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. And looking forward to seeing you next time. God bless.